So, welcome to another edition of Behind the Gate with Scott and Kate. I'm your host tonight, Scott Waddell. Caitlin unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, but we do have a special guest. This is episode number 32, and we're sponsored by American History, who you can see in action on Saturday night, North America Cup night. And we'll be talking to someone who's heavily involved in North America Cup night in just a moment. And this fella from Prince Edward Island, and he's a Hall of Fame inductee. He's won O'Brien Awards on numerous occasions and has won such great races like the Little Brown Jug and the Gold Cup and Saucer. So we'll talk to Mr. Ian Moore in just a moment. Just wanted to say a few stats here, Ian, just before we start. Last year, he had a super year, 51 wins, 3.1 million in earnings. And of course, you had an O'Brien Award last year. And lifetime, you get 722 lifetime training wins, over 23 million in purses, and great average too of 348. And of course, Ian, well known for such horses as we'll go way back, Saunders Glory, and then more recently with horses like Stockade Sealster, Tattoo Artist, and so on. So we're pleased to have with us for episode number 32, Dr. Ian Moore from Ontario tonight. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been it's kind of been a battle trying to get this scheduled, but so glad you could take a few minutes of your time, and we'll have a general conversation on what you've been doing. Of course, you're from Prince Edward Island, and you've made the move to Ontario for the last few years. So, kind of tell us how you, for those that don't know you really well, Ian, kind of how you got your start around the horse racing industry and your beginnings in Prince Edward Island.
Well, got to my first racetrack about 50 years ago, I guess, in Summerside, Edward Island.
Yeah.
And the school that I went to in Summerside, I was only about maybe 12 years old then, somewhere around there. School that I went to was a couple of blocks away from SRW, Summerside Raceway.
Yeah.
And the janitor at the school, his name was Lester Chappell. And anyway, I used to talk to him all the time, and he took me out to the track one day, and it basically went from there. Now, I do remember vividly back then, the track maintenance guy, his last name was Jeffries. I kind of forget his first name, but unlike today, they used to chase kids away from the track back then. He chased me at the gate one day with a pitchfork.
Oh, is that right?
Like about 13 years old. Yeah.
Oh,
and
my
I mean,
God.
as you know, today we encourage the kids to come to the paddock, to
Yeah,
come
we
to the
welcome
track
people.
and take rides and all that sort of stuff. So that's a huge change in over 50 years, that's for sure. There's never any kids around the track, and eventually I got accepted, by the local group of guys there, who unfortunately back then it was very common at racetrack people to be drunk all the time. So I mean, I'm not talking just drunk for a day. Several days at a time. They'd be going to the bootleggers, which were very popular back then. And I have a lot of memories of that. So I spent most of my time in those days with George Sobey, who's the father of Dale Sobey. And Carl was Dale's brother as well. Into horse racing as well. He was a paddock judge many years out in Sacramento, California, and Dale and now his son Alex have been in harness racing in Summerside for many years. Dale was away at the time working for Joe O'Brien, so I was George's go-to kid, I guess, at the time.
Okay.
And he wasn't immune from the drinking as well, so sometimes I ran the stable by myself. He only had 3 or 4 horses usually. It took about 2 years before I finally got to jog my first horse. His name was Doc Price. He was about a 7-year-old gelding by Price Tag, which is a popular breed back then at the time.
Yeah.
This is 1970 I'm talking about now, 69, 70. And that was quite a thrill for me, and I've never forgot that. I can still picture that in my mind today. So it's funny,
Yeah.
I was talking to Ron McClellan, my longtime partner and friend with RG Group Limited.
Yes,
Ron
our
and Gail
Gila
in
Group.
Bathurst and Brunswick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he brought up the story that was in Trout about the papermaker, and he said, I don't know how you remember those things. I can remember things, the track with horses' names and everything for like 50 years ago.
Me
But I
too. Yeah.
can't tell you what I might have done today at 10 o'clock this morning.
Oh yeah, in the very same
So
way.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah. You say the papermaker,
yeah.
geez, that
My
brings back
mother,
a lot of them.
yeah, that was one of our first big time horses, I guess, at the time. My mother used to hate the racetrack and the horses because her father was a bad gambler. He used to drink and gamble, and many times they had no food on the
Okay.
table as a result. So he she tried her hardest to keep me away from the track, and I'd actually quit school a couple of times over the ensuing next 5 years, including after 1 year of college at the Nova Scotia Agricultural College in Truro. I quit school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but anyway, when I did back, my marks went up, and my mother said, "There you go. It's because of the racetrack." Well, the PI government gave me
Yeah.
a bursary then at Christmas time to half decent, $600, and I bought a horse from Calvin Ives in Truro. Then my marks went even
Oh, did
higher.
you?
So there you go. I tried it. Yeah. So I've actually had the best of both worlds in terms of I've made a career and a lifestyle out of harness racing,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
veterinarian and trainer and an owner, driver and a blacksmith and everything else, I guess, along the way. And it's been very rewarding for me. I've been very fortunate to have been involved with many good people like Ron and Gail McClellan that I just mentioned,
Yeah.
and a lot of the good people along the way. And I've been fortunate to be involved with a lot of really good horses, and it's certainly been a pleasure to be here, and I wouldn't have done it any other way.
So when you look back, Ian, who would you point out as your uh couple of your mentors?
Well, obviously George Sobey was number one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in spite of the drinking problems, he was a top horseman in my eyes. And
Yeah.
it's fun as I look back. The horsemen back then would do things that they probably didn't know what they were doing, but in essence,
Yeah.
they were doing good things. And I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. So when we trained or raced a horse,
Yeah.
they had those old galvanized buckets back then. There wasn't any plastic buckets, and you had to put
Yeah.
about 4 inches of water in the bucket and a couple of handfuls of baking soda.
Yeah.
And the theory was that it was good for the kidneys. That's what they had to drink. They couldn't drink anything else while you watered them out until that was gone. And the theory
Yeah.
being that it was good for the kidneys. But in essence, in actual fact, it was good to prevent and help any tying up and muscle issues that may have occurred post racing and post training. So they're way ahead of their
Yeah.
time, some of those guys, I tell you. I can remember
Yeah.
George used to tell me to go up the side of the road to the track and pick this white Alside clover, it was called. And that's used to feed that
Yeah.
to the horses in the afternoon. Well, Alside clover has
Yeah.
warfarin in it. So that wasn't a good thing.
Oh,
But most
okay.
of the things they did were really good. And it's amazing, but some of the things I do today, I used to watch a lot of people, and
Yeah.
George was a mentor, and I'll give you a couple in a minute. And I'd always watch people that were successful.
Yeah.
And those are the people that try to copy and assimilate. And I still do things today that I learned from George Sobey over 55 years ago. So it's
Oh, wow.
amazing. And
Yeah.
some of the other guys back then, Cyril Smith was Clarkie Smith's father, and the
Yeah.
3 years at Truro, I guess the last 2 years after he quit the first year, I worked
Yeah.
for Huey McKay before he went to work for Dr. Shives in Truro.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from Huey. But Cyril Smith was Clarkie's father. He had 6 or 8 horses there. I used to shoe them, drive them, do everything. I'm stabled in the same barn with him. And he was
Yeah.
a terrific supporter of me when I was young. I mean, I'm 17, 18 years old by that time. And then after the second time I quit school, I went to work for Dr. Russ Furness in Ontario. He was stable just down the road from Mohawk, and it was called Argyle Farm at the time. It's still there. It's called Milton Equine Clinic today. And he was, I ended up like him. And basically, he was practicing veterinarian on PI. He used to do our general practice in Kensington, outside of Summerside. And then he started racing horses and did very well. He was always in the top 5 trainers on the Ontario Jockey Club, it was called back then. And he did a lot for me, and he encouraged me to go back to school as well. So that's why I had the best of both worlds. I had school and education, a really good career as a veterinarian, which I enjoyed immensely over the years, and also the training and racing of horses as well.
So tell us about this horse. He was a favorite of mine. Loved to watch this guy, Shadow Play. Of course, won the Little Brown Jug, and he's went on to be a prolific sire. And so tell us a little bit about Shadow Play when you first got him as a yearling, and did you know early on that he was going to be something special?
Yeah, about February probably, I guess, that year. Sometimes it's hard to tell the babies. I've had babies like that you think are going to be really good. They get down to 2 minutes and they bottom out, so. But he obviously didn't do that. As I sit here talking to you on this Zoom, my home screen on my PC has multiple images of Shadow Play all over it. As does my phone as well. I still have the backdrop on my phone. And I'm never going to change it. He one of the favorite horses of mine. He was an after the fact, really. Ron McClellan again. He was at sale in Harrisburg, and I was as well. But I left early, and if I remember correctly now, he sold on the last day of the yearlings, which was Wednesday. They had the yearlings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I had bought a couple, and I bought a couple in London as well. Back then, I only used to have maybe, 10, 11 horses. That would be the limit for me because I was a career veterinarian at the time. So we're talking 2006, I think, somewhere around there. And I was working at the Atlantic Veterinary College, I guess, at that time. And so anyway, Ron had called me. He looked at him. He was very late in the sale, one of the last, 50 yearlings to sell that day. And he came from a farm called Foxden Farm, which raised good yearlings, but typically they didn't bring a whole lot of money at the sale. And so anyway, we bought him for $60,000. To PEI. He didn't come right away. He got hung up in Montreal for a while. He maybe came, I don't know, say 5, 6, 7 days later. And he came 9 o'clock. Ronnie Gas dropped him off. And Nancy had already told me, my wife Nancy, that I've got enough yearlings to spend enough money. That's that. So he walks in the barn, had the front stall was still open, so that's where he went. I'm standing there looking at him, and Nancy comes out and looks at him, and so I didn't say anything. She said to me, "What, are you going to buy a piece of him?" And I said, "Well, you told me a few days ago that I'm all done." She said, I don't know. She said it wouldn't be very good if we didn't buy a piece of him, and he turned out to be really good. So I ended up taking the quarter, and Serge Savard at the time.
I was going to ask you how you ever got connected with him.
Well, in 93 to 96, I was the founding president of the PI Senators, which is the American Hockey League affiliate.
Okay, yes,
so that's the first time Charlottetown had big time hockey like that, and we built boxes in the Civic Center and upgraded the Civic Center. We did a lot of stuff there, and so around 2005 or 6, I think it was, the PEI Rocket, or sorry, they were outside of Montreal. I can't remember where they were now, but they were the Rocket. They were called up there, and they moved to PEI they as a major junior A team. And Serge Savard Jr. was running that team. He had played semi-pro hockey himself, so Serge Senior show up once in a while. And I had met Serge Senior back in the 90s because John Ferguson was player development coordinator with the Ottawa Senators. So he came to Charlottetown a lot to watch the team play. And
Yeah.
back you could watch, we'd sit in the box and watch the game. We'd have Mohawk races on the TV.
Oh yeah.
And we'd walk up the door and stand at the window and watch the races going on in Charlottetown. He thought that was great. So John Ferguson, who was heavily involved in harness racing, as you know, he introduced me to Serge back then. So
Yeah.
Serge, for at least 2 or 3 years prior to Shadow Play, had asked me if he could buy into a yearling. And each time he did, it was kind of later on, and we'd already pieced out the ones we had. I only had maybe 4, maybe 5 yearlings back then, not like today. And so anyway, I got home on Thursday from Harrisburg. There's a hockey game that night, or Friday, I guess it was. There's a hockey game that night because I stayed for the mix sale. I always buy horses there at the mix sale as well. And I went up the elevator, and there's Serge Senior and Junior there, and he yells at me before I got to him, "What about that horse, Doc?" I said, "I got just the one for you." So for $4,000, Serge was a 25% partner, and Ron and Gail kept the 50. And
Wow.
it was the first horse he ever had with us. He made $1.5 million. That's 3-year-old. So that kept him right on board. Then he said, horses every year, babies with us every year since then. It was about 2004 when I did the switch from race horses to babies.
Yeah.
A horse called After who really turned me the other way.
Remember him well, yeah.
Yeah, it was getting difficult to buy race horses back then, just as it is today. I mean, it's terrible difficult to buy one today, and you have to pay for them big time as well. I used to buy them for $5, and try and make them Saturday night preferreds for St. John and Truro and Charlottetown and Somerset, right? So, but you can't do that anymore. So the babies is what I've been concentrating on the last 20 years. So we make our own basically. So Shadow Play was a terrific horse. He was in February. I trained him with 2 others one day in my farm track at home, and so he's 2-year-old now, and I can't hold him. Like he's just going to rock off of these things. He always was very gritty and tough as nails.
Yeah.
Evidenced by the final after being lame after the elimination of the Little Brown Jug. And I put an open bridle on him in early February, and I've never done that with a 2-year-old since that early. I mean, I've had open bridles on babies, subsequent to that, but not that early.
Yeah.
And earplugs. Well, and he was just, and the first time I could really say that he was really good, we schooled him in our gate at home. Serge was there watching, Senior and Junior, because Serge's girlfriend at the time, Lisa, Serge Junior's girlfriend, Lisa, drove in the truck. Nancy was driving the truck, and we had 2 horses on the gate, and she couldn't get that thing out of the way quick enough for me. I'm pushing it all the way around the turn, and I said, "This is going to be a nice call." So he won his first race or 2 in Charlottetown, and took him to Mohawk. I drove him for a little bit. There's a 2-year-old. Actually gave him his 2-year-old record in 57. And we'd actually considered selling. He had a lot of bad luck. He was drawing the 10 hole all the time, like constantly. If you look at his stats, he's always 8, 10 all the time. And in fact, as a 2-year-old, in his whole career, he only drew the rail, I think it was twice. And once was the last start I raced him as a 2-year-old because they gave 2-year-olds a rail at Flamborough, right, the inside.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even in Charlottetown, they were doing that. And if it was 4 2-year-olds, I was drawing the 4 hole, And the other time was at the Little Brown Jug, 3 winners draw. He drew the rail. That was his day, right? But never ever do that. And he was a tough luck horse that way. And so we had considered selling him because he didn't do a whole lot as a 2-year-old. He did pace in 51 and 4, I think, one night. And so I said, just give me another month. So there's no races for him until November, maybe. I forget what it was now, but I took him to Mohawk twice in a 10-day period. And I trained him. I went a half in a minute. I went a half in 101 the first time, and I went him on 54 flat. And then the next time I went a half in a minute, and I went up on 54 flat again. But I was the final quarter, 26 seconds. I said, we better keep this guy. I said to them. So we did. And obviously, as they say, the rest is history. So,
You must just beam with pride when you see a lot of his sons and daughters, doing the things that they're doing. Of course, what can you say about Bulldog Hanover, right? I mean, it must just be something really special for you.
yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
You know, he had to do it the hard way too. He didn't get a book of, 150 mares with $500,000
Yeah.
made or whatever, not of 5 and 10,000 claimers.
Yeah.
And he still produced a lot of decent horses that way. He did have good books after a while, but there was really only a year or two that he may have
Yeah.
got what I call a quality group of mares, as
Yeah.
compared to a lot of others that are out there that stand, say, at Hanover Farms, where they get every good mare in the books, so to speak.
Yeah.
But he did it the hard way, and I am very proud, and I was so proud and glad we all were that he finally got into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Part of the why it took so long maybe is because he wasn't, a lot of his wins were in the U.S. and not in Canada, even though he was
Right.
Canadian owned and
Yeah.
so on, Canadian trained. It didn't matter, but I think he's got a rightful spot there now as a
Yeah.
stallion and a race. I mean, when you think back over even the last 20 years since
Yeah.
that's happened, 20, I guess, but you might have to think long and hard to think of a Canadian-owned 3-year-old that
Yeah.
made $1.5 million as a 3-year-old, right? And I
That's
mean,
true.
today are twice as much as they were back then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a few probably. I mean, obviously some beat somewhere, but
Yeah.
it might be hard to find another one, right? So,
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty. Yeah, I'm very proud of what he's accomplished, and I still go to see him,
Yeah.
once a year
Yeah.
when there's that win back farm in Ontario here, and now
Yeah.
New York. So I probably will at some point in time, but yeah, he's
So
been
tell
he gave to us a lot, and he continues.
That's awesome. So tell us, of course, you got the North America Cup coming up on Saturday night, and you've got a Son of Shadow play in there, Storm Shadow. He drew the rail in. What did you think of his performance in the elimination? You finished second in the elimination, and you got the rail for Saturday night. So just tell us what your feelings are on how he raced in that elimination, and what do you think his chances are for Saturday?
Well, first of all, he's not a son of Shadow Play. He's out of a Shadow Play
Oh,
mare.
geez.
That
Oh,
particular
okay. Yeah.
that particular year, there's only about 21 or 22 Shadow Plays for sale at public auction, and I
Yeah.
really find one that I liked, I guess. So we ended up buying 2 yearlings out of Shadow Play mares, and he was one of them. He was the
Okay.
most yearling we bought that year, 160 American in Harrisburg, and
Yeah.
I had already bought quite a few, and I had way more partners wanted in on him
Yeah.
than I had room for, and unfortunately, I always take pieces of I have pieces of 9 of them this year.
Yeah.
And I was unable to get a piece myself of Dan, we used to call him,
Yeah.
because his name was T.H. Squirrely Dan
Okay.
originally. He's from Terre Hills, from, I guess Squirrely Dan was a TV show. I don't know. Well, so we still call him Dan. But he had a rough start as a 2-year-old. I broke him after he came up from Harrisburg to Florida, came down, I mean, and I got 1 week's jogging in him, and the Saturday
Yeah.
afternoon, the last day I jogged him, he had a severe colic, and I was able to diagnose by
Oh,
rectal examination had what's called a nephrosplenic entrapment. So we
yeah.
immediately rushed him up to an equine clinic to have surgery done on him. And if you get that problem early, that would probably be one of the best prognoses there is for colic surgery. So he
Yeah.
missed the whole over 2 months, and I never
Yeah.
really started. Well, I didn't start with him the last few days of January,
Yeah.
which is why he didn't race till August. And I really put it to him when we trained him back, and he took it all.
Yeah.
But he never really impressed. As a 2-year-old, he used to have to chase him with a whip. He was a typical Bettor's Delight. But once he
Yeah.
saw the gate, things changed, and that's quite common with Bettor's Delight. So um, anyway, he raced several. I think he started with 5 races right in a row to try to
Yeah.
catch up to the rest. He ended up winning the gold final as a 2-year-old is the Breeders' Crown elimination and third in the final that year, and maybe
Yeah.
375 and something like that. So
Yeah.
he and this year he's just turned into a terrific little horse. He'll give you every ounce that he has.
Yeah.
He needs, there's no doubt about it. He hasn't beat 150 yet, and I'm sure they're going to beat 150 Saturday night. It's supposed to be sunny day and nice day Saturday, but nothing that he would do would surprise me now. Let's put it that way. I was really, I was pretty down Saturday night after the first elimination, obviously with their other 3-year-old who I was very, and I still am very high on, and always thought that he was the better of the two. So Dan certainly, Storm Shadow certainly made up for it by finishing second in his elimination. And I was sitting with Ronnie McDonald, who's from PI also, and Brett and Ronnie have Janelle Granny, and they drew the 2-hole. Bad luck for them. And I saw that red ball coming out for us. I'll take it. So, so it's not the preferred place to be at Mohawk, perhaps, but I think for him, couldn't be better.
Yeah. So when it comes to, of course, you've got a lot of younger horses. When it comes to choosing your catch drivers, Ian, what kind of goes into the decision making? I'm sure, the guys, the good ones, and there's a lot of them, have their choice of some in different races. But what kind of goes into that decision making?
Well, I always try to get a top driver.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, and it's the same at most any track that you, Netherlands or Mohawk or whatever, there's usually only about, half a dozen guys that are in that top echelon of drivers. So I always try to get one of those, and I always try to match the temperament and the chemistry of the horse with the temperament and chemistry of the driver.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, I've got a filly that I'm going to qualify tomorrow, baby, 2-year-old filly for the first time at Mohawk. And she's kind of like a hot little can be crazy thing, right?
Yeah.
And I opted to go with Sylvain, who has all kinds of experience with those kind of horses. Most experience of any of the drivers that are currently active at Mohawk. And it's, he can handle one like that where perhaps a younger guy might not be what I want on that, or somebody that's down the road may not be what I want on her either. So I always do that. And unfortunately, some of the guys like James McDonald obviously has been and is still the leading driver at Mohawk Woodbine for 3 years now. It's very difficult to get him because he's not contracted, but he's, he has loyalties to say Sean Stacy and his horses and so on. And so it's difficult. I found it difficult to get him, and I really hate it when I have, especially a young horse, when I'm jumping from one driver to another every week, because inevitably, if I went one driver this week and then I go to another one next week, inevitably it's a test drive, the first drive, right? You're wasting your time. I only race my 2-year-olds 10 times a year at the most, probably, maybe a little bit more for some of them, but not much. And so every race counts. Every race is a stake race. Every race is big money. So I want somebody that I can count on going to be there every week. And like Sylvain and Jody and James and those guys, and Bobby McClure, like those guys are top drivers at Mohawk. And there's a few up there as well.
Yeah.
But so I always try to get one of those, and like I said, temperament and characteristics of the horse match that with the driver. If I want one sent down the road, then I'll get somebody else that does that more frequently. I don't want to bring up names in trouble with anybody, but you know what I mean. Some of them obviously need that too. So
exactly.
I thought Dave Miller would be, Dave's a good friend of mine, and that's from the Shadow Play days.
Oh,
he stayed loyal to him the entire year. I thought he'd be a good match with Cody, and maybe he might be down the road if I get the bad mistake out of him behind the gate. We got a different bit in his mouth this week, couple different bits. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. We were lucky to draw into the consolation, so hopefully our luck will continue on Saturday night.
Right on. So tell us about the Gold Cup and Saucer and kind of what it meant to you to win the Gold Cup and Saucer, and just a few years back to see your son drive the winning horse?
Well, as you can imagine from the recent article in Trot Magazine, the Gold Cup
Yeah,
and Saucer has and still does hold a special place in my heart. They
absolutely.
called me from Trot and they said, they said, we've talked about the jug and shadow play and so on and this and that and everything. You got any other stories you might want to tell? And I said, yes, I do.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how that
yeah,
story evolved. So I don't wear any rings, but I have a ring from the Little Brown
yeah,
Jug, and I've got a ring from the Gold Saucer, which the CDP did, retrospectively after the fact. They had all the previous drivers or winners, and they gave them all rings, and that was such a wonderful gesture. I mean, that meant a lot
yeah,
to me, and I still have those. If I'm in
yeah.
Florida, if I'm in Ontario, I take them with me all the time wherever I go, and I show people proudly. So, winning the Gold Cup and Saucer was, like you've heard this before from many, not
Oh,
just
yeah,
Prince Edward Islanders, but maritime in general. It's their dream to do so, and that was a
yeah,
dream come true for me in '88. And then in 2012, it was a terrific dream and family moment for me
oh,
when
yeah,
Tyler drove 18 and
yeah,
won the Gold Cup and Saucer. That
yeah,
was unreal too as a trainer. And I was
yeah.
most happy to hand the reins over at that time, right? So it was really good. I remember the talk back then. I was 18, not going to make it around the turn. He's going to break and all this stuff. And he drew the
Yeah,
rail in the final too. I said, don't listen to them guys. Just send that horse down the road. So
yeah,
he was ready to go, and Tyler did a good job. And Tyler still does a great job up here in Ontario. It's
yeah,
tough for young people like him to do well as drivers up here now because in all the little tracks, there's so many young people who want to be drivers or are drivers and trying to continue on.
yeah,
People like say Paul McKenzie and whatever who's been forever, and
yeah.
uh, and there's just too many drivers, not enough horses for them. So he's actually training a stable of 7 now, and some of
Yep.
those people wanted me to take. They convinced him to switch him over to Tyler. He's on the other side, and I'll cooperate with him and work with him, and we'll do the best that we can. So, and
Uh,
doing very well. So very proud of Tyler as well.
yeah, exactly. And when you look around Ontario, you see so many Maritimers. What do you think is that secret that Maritimers have? Because when these guys develop, your young guys that developed at a young age in the Maritimes and then went up to Ontario or they went down to the U.S. What do besides the hardworking maritime work ethic, what do you think kind of sets Maritimers apart?
Well, there's a number of factors there. First of all, there has been a ton of really good trainers and drivers in the Maritimes in years gone
Yeah,
past.
yeah,
People like Clarky Smith and whatever, and obviously people like Billy O'Donnell who went up the line. But there was a lot of people back then in those years
yeah,
that could have went to bigger tracks and well, and they just never did because they wanted to stay home and
yeah,
race at home for family reasons, for job reasons, because most people back in those days had another job. They couldn't make a living, enough of a living with horses, which is
exactly.
one of the reasons why I left home too. Very, very difficult. I mean, even today, PEI, they're doing not bad now, racing for $4,000, but
Yeah,
um, I get that for a win at some of the small here. You know what I mean? So,
I
and
know.
and the expenses may be more, but not enough. I'll tell you that. So, I think a lot of young people like myself grew up in the presence of some fantastic drivers and trainers.
Yeah,
Like I don't know, even people like Roddy Jameson, Carl Jameson came from there, and the work
yeah,
ethic, as you said, is tremendous on there compared to up
yeah,
here. And I think a lot of people from Sackville Downs and places like that, um, you get the horse racing in your blood in the Maritimes to stay in there. I can
no, yeah,
remember sitting outside Wally Hennessy's barn in between cards on the Saturday doubleheader at the end of the week of A&E week. I
yeah,
think that was around 1984, but I'm not sure. We had one in the, 86 or 87 maybe, and I remember sitting, 'cause I was 18 then, but I remember sitting outside Wally Hennessy's barn in between cards on the Saturday doubleheader at the end of the week of A&E week. I think that was around 1984, but I'm not sure. We had one in the I guess it's called the Provincial Cup back. It might have been Buddy
Yeah.
Hanover, I forget now. But
Yeah.
anyway, I sat there with Wally Bucket and we were talking about things, and Wally was the king of the Maritimes at the time. And I said, "You really need to go somewhere and get out of here." I said, You're just going to be the best there was here, but
Yeah.
that's all that's ever going to happen, right?"
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after that he went to the US and ended up in Pompano. And of course, Wally he's been a tremendous ambassador and a tremendous
Oh,
driver, and
yeah.
everything that you could say about Wally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, while they still talk every once in a while, he sent me congratulations by text here not too long ago with the Hall of Fame thing.
The
So
Hall of
he's
Fame.
a good
Yeah.
friend and a
Congratulations,
great,
by the way.
again, one of that list of tremendous, really good horse people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people went from here and found out that, hey, the racing's not that tough in Ontario or New York or wherever after all. And they've all done
Yeah.
well. There's not many people that left home back in those days, in the 70s and 80s, that
Yeah.
that weren't successful. There's a
Yeah.
ton of them. I mentioned Paul McKenzie and Whalens,
Jody.
Jimmy came up here. Jimmy Whalen came Ontario with 6 horses, and they named me the horses, and I'm thinking, holy smoke! I said to Nancy when he left, he was at our house for supper, and he got there, and I said he's going to really struggle with that, but he worked hard. He shod horses. He was at the barn till
Yeah.
midnight every night, and he had a lot of success accordingly.
Yeah.
And so many other people have done that as well. So
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people were scared to do so, or they couldn't do so for family and work reasons. But the ones
Yeah.
that did, there's not many I can name you failed in the big time, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah. And you probably watch the broadcasts, of course, that Red Shores puts on. And, I've said it a few times. I think their production team there and the team that they put together and the product that they put on the track and, with Vance over there, adding to it, the excitement of horse racing and PEI, you must sit back and just think, geez, we've come such a long way.
Oh yeah. I watch a lot of those broadcasts when I'm in
Yeah.
Florida in the wintertime, which I've been
Yeah.
doing for 15 years now, Florida since '09. And I watch a lot of them today.
Yeah.
And their production that they put on is absolutely
Yeah.
second to nobody.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
know.
tremendous.
Yeah.
It is unreal. And I might be wrong when I say this, but I believe that um, I think Bell with the fiber optic network, they get money from the government, but they have to have a lot of local broadcasts. So they take
Yeah.
that show quite readily because it's
Yeah.
already produced and ready to go. So
Exactly.
I think that's still Lee Drake will correct me, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
they do a tremendous job, and the the kids and the people that are around the track there nowadays, I don't know them all anymore, but the drivers they do a great job there, and the
Yeah.
caliber and quality of the horses on PEI just it's increased like 10 times what it was when I left down there, say in 2009, somewhere around there. And it's really good to see and a great feeling. And I wish that your province, New Brunswick and Nova
I
Scotia,
know.
would get on the support that PEI has had from
Yeah.
the government. They'll never close the tracks from PEI, because if they do, they'll hear it from 150,000 people, I'm sure.
Oh
So,
my God.
and the horsemen down there, I really hope they appreciate that support. I did say that one time when I spoke at a banquet, say 10 years ago down there, how thankful you guys need to be and appreciative of what
Oh,
government has done for you, because there's a lot of other jurisdictions, and I mean, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia is an example, they don't
yeah.
get that, and it makes it a tough go, that's for sure. And it's a shame because, as you know, the Maritimes is interconnected in everything that we do, and
Yeah.
they need horses from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. They can't function
Yeah.
just on PEI. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's sad, especially the situation just in St. John where I live here. You've got fond memories, I'm sure, of Exhibition Park Raceway and racing in the provincial cups and coming over exhibition weeks. And, we had Wally on there last week, and, he still looks back on Exhibition Park Raceway with so much fondness, and kind of catapulted him into that next level.
Yeah, we were there every year at the NE week,
I know.
and then we went to, like, Fredericton was fantastic. I used to love going there. A little
Yeah,
small track, but the atmosphere was fantastic, and even St. John was as well. Or corn balls and or corn boils and barbecues every night after each race
yeah,
card, and
yeah,
venture was a big thing back then, and I can remember, when I was young, when I was in the George Sobey days again, how Basil Whalen, I would go over to St. John with them. I'd ride in the back of the goddamn horse truck with the horses, and
oh
uh,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I went in that grandstand. They bet $100,000 live in that grandstand. Like, no simulcast, none of that stuff,
No,
and you know like Lloyd Hanna and Cheeky Charlton
yeah,
Walter Whalen and guys like, they were there then. And again, those were all top horse people that
yeah,
knew a lot and did a lot back then. It's so sad when I see what's happened today. And I know the last few years I was in the
uh,
Maritimes. Oh, there's no grandstand there, and it's just hanging on a thread. And my favorite
yeah.
track of all time, Maritimes, was Woodstock, New Brunswick. I mean, they
Oh yeah,
it used to be Friday for their old home week in early August,
Friday. Yep,
and
yep,
yeah, and it was uh, that I love going to Woodstock. I mean, we used to go up Thursday night, and I
yeah,
had living quarters in one of the last trailers they had down there. We hook up a barbecue and a
yeah,
whole bunch of beers and sit there all night.
yeah,
Anybody came along, the Chip Calhoun, he passed away last winter. He was a great friend of mine, and they used to work that surface, and I always loved racing there at Woodstock. And I can remember one year I was there. They had 15 races on the Friday. They had all the Atlantic Sire Stakes. They had every good horseman and every good horse that was in the Maritimes that one night at Woodstock, and
yeah,
it was just
yeah,
fantastic. So I
yeah,
really hope that racing continues at Woodstock. I see
yeah,
you had a little bit of a setback here recently, but
yeah.
hopefully that will be resolved. And as you know, once it closes, it's not coming back.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
I know.
So I hope it can come on. I flew over Fredericton Raceway on the way back from taking Nancy home a couple of weeks ago, and I got a nice couple of pictures of the
Oh,
track that's
okay.
still there, and there's actually a horse jogging early in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway, I I really hope it keeps going there, and because, like I said, once it closes, it's not coming back.
yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, no, there's so many maritime people that have gone away, and when you look at a guy like Mark Campbell, Ian, and how he's dominated for 8 or 10 years or whatever it's going on, it's just simply amazing what he's been able to accomplish. A guy like him, I know it's hard for him to make that move, but he went down to drive at Saratoga there a few weeks back, and he fit right in, with a lot of good drivers down there. So
Yeah,
although it's a
yeah.
tough decision, do you think sometime he should give it a try?
Oh, 100%. But
Yeah,
it's easy for me to sit here and say that when he's got
I
a
know.
family of, I don't know how many kids now, maybe five, right? And his
Yeah,
wife's there, home
yeah,
there. They got a new farm there. So
yeah,
that's another one of those guys, with good horse people, good drivers, trainers from home, that
yeah.
for family reasons, is unable to make that jump. But
Right.
it's not the opportunities are perhaps nowadays not quite as plentiful as they were back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of opportunities back then to get hooked up with some money guys, whatever. But somebody like Mark Campbell could certainly go to any track, and if he got support from just a couple of people, it wouldn't be long
yeah,
before he'd have support more than that. I think he would
yeah,
do great. So, but yeah,
yeah,
it's tough nowadays, especially with the cost of everything, as you well know. It's
yeah,
just gotten here lately.
yeah. No, listen, Ian, thanks very much for joining tonight. I know we had some technical difficulties and stuff along the way, but it's been fantastic talking to you. I remember when you won day at Exhibition Park Raceway one weekend, you couldn't get a start at Charlottetown back in the day with Astronomical. And we gave you a call and said, listen, come on over to St. John, we'll race you. And the horseman didn't mind racing you just because. And I remember that day, like people came out and the fence was lined up watching that horse go.
Yeah, and like I said, I hope it continues on in the Brunswick, and
Yeah.
hopefully get there over time here for sure. I really appreciate talking to you. I can
Yeah.
obviously I can hear all night, talk forever.
Oh,
But
I know. I hear you.
yeah. So anyway, I wish you well, and hope, like I said,
Yes, you as well, and best of luck this Saturday night.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and hello to all my friends down there for sure.
All
I'm sure
right.
we're seeing a lot of them over around town.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ian. And that was Ian Moore, of course, joining us tonight for episode number 32, sponsored by American History. And as mentioned, you can see him along with Doc Moore's horse, Storm Shadow. He's in the big one, but American History in the 13th race on Saturday night as well. And our next podcast, and Ian knows this fella quite good. He's driving for him on Saturday night. Bob McClure is going to join us on the podcast coming up next week. So we'll get his thoughts on North America Cup after the fact. And we'll have young Justin Turnbull sitting in as a co-host that night. Him and Bob are fairly good friends. They communicate quite a bit. So I think it'll be a great thrill for young Justin to get to co-host a podcast with one of his favorite drivers. So that's coming up. So again, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Gate with Scott and Kate.